Citizen Slave! Hello, and welcome to a Talking Title Screen special. I thought this would be a great way to re-engage with my game channel and kickstart some new content. Now, for those of you who don't know, Talking Title Screens is a series where I take video game title screens and I deconstruct them on the fly, pulling them apart to their components to see how effective they are at representing the game that you're about to play. Now, why is this one special? Well, because I've decided to cover every main entry in the Assassin's Creed series, almost. There's a couple I don't own, but I own pretty much all of the main entries. As ever, if you spot something that I don't, by all means chuck that in the comments and talk to me about Assassin's Creed. We are going to be going on a little bit about this series. So, what are your favourite games? Do you prefer the older games, the newer games? Do you have a particular favourite, a particular environment they went to? Talk to me in the comments. Okay, let's begin. The original Assassin's Creed. Now, it has a very nice, clear, distinct, and quite effective title screen for what it's trying to represent and carry it over from the game itself. The font is nice and clean and well designed, very elongated and slender in places, with that nice point at the end of the lettering, almost representing the assassin's blade. The creed below it is, of course, the same font, but in red, to relate to the violence you'll no doubt undertake as an assassin, and we have those nice elongated lines either side of the C and D in the creed, which give it a bit of an elegance and just kind of elongate it a touch. I quite like the symbol in the background, its prominence, very clear white against the black and the red of the other font. And then we move to the background, which is really nicely balanced actually. We have this incredibly heavy fog, this mist, and that's part of the animus, these memories that we're trying to move through and understand and interpret as we play the game. But within that, and the nice little blue lighting that appears, we also have the information of the animus. We have what looks like bits of DNA and other bits of information and numbers and things that pop into prominence. And it all ties nicely in together to represent what we'll be doing as the ancestor of an assassin, trying to understand these memory strains and demystifying who they were and what they did. Okay, let's just take a to listen to the music for a moment. So it's not really music, it's more ambience, and it's not dissimilar to something like a Vangelis Blade Runner track. It's got heavy synth here and there, it's got a few drums, and it's almost a touch machine-like to represent the world of the animus. So overall, I think this is relatively cohesive, quite clear and overt in its intentions, and the meaning is nicely knitted throughout the design of this title screen. Okay, let's move to the first in the Ezio trilogy, and that is, of course, Assassin's Creed 2. Now, as you can see, this is not entirely dissimilar from the prior one, which is why I thought this series would flow quite neatly together. There are only slight variations, really, throughout a lot of these games. But this one is very similar to the original. I don't really like the way the font has been altered. We don't have those nice lines either side of the creed, which just elongate it and give it a nice elegance. The 2 seems a little bit shoved in, and the glitch kind of works. It's glitching in and out of visibility. It works a little bit, and again ties into the animus. The background is a little bit different. So this time we don't have that fog, but what we do have is what looks like a computer construct. Those moving, very bright light squares either side, and then we have the light changes, and the prominence of the Assassin's Creed symbol in the background isn't a great deal. It's just obscured within what looks like that more almost Matrix-esque construct. Let's take a listen to the music then. So this time it's even more stripped back than the initial game. It's more ambient in the sense that it's got those synths still, but it's very gentle and discordant in times, almost to reflect the nature of the literal construct that we are in. So it does have that slight separation from the original game. I don't prefer this as much as I do the original. I don't think it's as strong. I think they could have done a lot more with it. So let's move to the second game in the Ezio trilogy, and that is Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Now, this is almost a combination of the prior two title screens. So we still have the same lettering, but of the first game this time. Of course, we have the Assassin's Creed in black and Brotherhood in red. We have those nice elegant lines either side the creed, and the symbol this time, again in white, but in more of that bright, overbearing, hard light, rather than just a plain matte white. We are glitching in the background in and out of the two types of title screen almost. So we have that fog, that mist with the symbols that represent the animus and demystifying it. But we also flick over to this wired, square construct that relates to the computer elements of Assassin's Creed 2. So I really do like the way they've combined those two into this one title screen. Okay, let's take a listen to the music for a moment. So this is far more actiony. It's far more a call to arms. It's far more to push the player forward on this exciting journey. It has strings, it moves between chords, it has a nice quickness to it, and it's certainly not just an ambient track that we've come to expect from the prior games. It has some agency, and I think it fits the title screen quite nicely because there's a bit more going on in the background than there has been in the older games. Okay, let's move on to the final in the Ezio trilogy then, and that is Revelations. So this title screen is a touch more understated than the prior ones. A bit more refined, perhaps. The lettering, again, at the same font, of course, as we've come to know. We've got the Revelations in red, and that hard, bright light with the Assassin's Creed. Now, the symbol this time is in grey and dark tones, and that kind of suits the conclusion to the trilogy. We're going to discover things that we didn't know before, so it's a bit more mysterious. This time, we retain the glitch again. I'm not sure how much I like that, but I do like the way the light passes over that central titling. The screen this time is divided very starkly. It's very dark by comparison to prior ones. We have this very thin black line, bunched together and spaced out in random equal kind of measure, again representing the construct we're in. But then we have the very mysterious bottom part, which is all in greys and blacks, and it all becomes very blurry and out of focus and then back into focus at times, as our understanding of what's happening in the game will uncover. I quite like this one, visually designed, but again it's very similar to the prior ones. We have that nice distinction with the Revelations in red against the grey and the Assassin's Creed more in the light section, but it does what it's done before. So let's just take a quick listen to the music. So we've got some of that ambience we had in the first two games. There's that there, there's the occasional synth, but we do have that really, really nice singing, that quite beautiful elevation, but very gentle. It suits the game because the game seems like it's heftier, more important. It's going to tell us something that we've never known before about these characters in this particular franchise as the trilogy ends. So it's okay. It's not one of the most amazing in the series, but it does what it's supposed to do in the context of the game that it's trying to represent. Okay, so now let's jump up to Assassin's Creed 3, the next game in the series beyond the Ezio trilogy. Now, this is kind of stripped back again a little bit more. It's quite different from what we've seen before, but still retains some elements of it. So this time we've got the Assassin's Creed symbol breaking into these fragments and then reforming, which is quite nice, as if to suggest we've moved past Ezio now and we're reforming to a different character and a different time. We have the 3 in red in the middle, again with that same lettering we've become accustomed to, the same font, with those very pointed edges. The outer side and the background elements are all kind of just floating wirework, floating dots, and kind of the pieces of this front symbol that are breaking apart and reforming. It's very stripped back, it's very clean, and I quite like this design. It's very simplistic, obviously, but it does jumpstart this next idea of what Assassin's Creed will be to some extent. Now let's just listen to the music for a second. Now, the music for this one is much more dramatic. It's certainly not set up to be an ambient piece as we've found before. It's much more in keeping with a movie, a big dramatic epic movie. And it's got a nice balance between the quieter, more string-driven moments that move very nicely into bigger, more dramatic moments throughout the piece. So yeah, it's relatively well designed, everything is quite cohesive, but it's a little bit too simplistic for what I think they could have achieved given what the context of the game is, the place it takes place in. Okay, let's move on to one of my favourite Assassin's Creed games, and that, of course, is Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Now, Black Flag does adhere to exactly what has come before. Representation of the game's environment or the animus in some kind of 3D design in the background. But I kind of like this one a little bit more. It doesn't do anything with the central font here. There's no titling of any kind. There's no number. It simply has that skull in the centre to represent that this is pirates, baby. Oh, yes. It's then got the symbol that we come to expect around the outside. Again, that hard light, but not really doing anything other than little touches of change in the light here and there. It's certainly not fragmenting and breaking apart as we saw in Assassin's Creed 3. I quite like the representation of the constructed ocean in the background, the ocean in the animus. This just a nice bounce of a real ocean line, the water moving up and down, and then we've got the little circles and bubbles to represent the motion of the water itself, just moving in and out and left and right. And I love the way the light refracts, both from the bottom, but especially on the top, those big light refractions moving slowly around and creating that little bubble in the centre. Let's just take a listen to the music for a second. Now, I think this piece is beautiful. It really does audibly set the scene for being a pirate. It's got that nice use of violins and strings. It sounds as if it belongs to a pirate in the sea going on an adventure, and it really fits with that green ocean, bluish green ocean in the background, and the vibe of being a pirate. So I think this is one of the most distinct in the series, title screen-wise, and I also think it works most cohesively thus far. Okay, let's move to our next Assassin's Creed title screen then, and that is a semi-related game to Black Flag, and that of course is Assassin's Creed Rogue. So this came out at not a dissimilar time to Black Flag, and again it has a very clear, distinct style in its title screen. Again, doing similar things that we've seen before. It's taking those fractured elements of the symbol that we saw in Assassin's Creed 3 and combining it with the solid Templar symbol that's really important to this game's narrative and characters. Again, it's very clean. There's no clutter on screen. We see the fragments just around the outside floating in the background, the little sparkles of white light, and the mist which covers that central part of the screen with a lovely purple haze balancing the ice-white colouring of the Assassin's Creed symbol and Templar symbol, that as they change have that lovely white light when they fragment and then reform. So again, I quite like this title screen. It's very simplistic, but it's very effective. I still prefer Black Flag thus far in terms of the overall design, but this one visually works quite well. Let's just take a listen to the music for a second. So this music is a little bit more classical. It certainly suits this particular context, what we're going to be doing within the game, the narrative and thematics. But it harkens back a little bit to Assassin's Creed 3. It's got that beautiful singing that elevates the track and raises it a little bit, with little bits of chords here and there popping up to move the track forward, and that very, very gentle beat that moves it along. So this works quite well. I like the starkness of it, I like its overall design, but I still much prefer Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Okay, now let's move on to one of my favourite Assassin's Creed games, and also one of my favourite title screens in the series, and that's Assassin's Creed Syndicate. So Syndicate has a very distinct location. They all do, of course. But Syndicate in particular, this period of London, is all about steams and cogs and smoke and trains and all this new technology, this steam-powered technology. And that comes across beautifully in the title screen, which harkens back to the first few title screens in terms of the font. So in prior ones we've almost removed the name. We just have a symbol and the logo itself. Well, that's changed in this one. We go back to that stark whites for the Assassin's Creed and the original font, with its beautiful pointed edges and the elongated lines either side of Creed. We have Syndicate in red, reminiscent of the original few games. Or Brotherhood, for instance. We have that distinction between the secondary subtitle and the main title. But this time, what's so cool is we have this whole steam apparatus moving around in the background. You've got the Assassin's Creed symbol baked into steel or iron in the background there, and we have all the cogs slowly moving around and the steam moving across the screen as the cogs turn. I really like this. I really like the way it's designed. I really like the way it fits the context of the world, and it makes itself more distinct than the prior title screens that we've seen in the series. Let's just take a listen to the music for a second. So again, this isn't so much music, this is more ambient this time. Mainly you can hear the turning and clicking of those cogs and the steam plumes as they pass over into the screen. And it really fits, and it makes you feel like you might be surrounded by the what this would be like in London, these sounds constantly surrounding you everywhere. It's got that slight hum, almost like a bell ring in the background, but that's really it, and I think cohesively it fits so well together. I actually don't even think it needs the font and the titling in the red and white on screen. I think you could remove that and it would look even more beautiful with just the symbol on top of these Steamworks. Great title screen. Okay, let's move to one of the more controversial in the series, and that is Assassin's Creed Unity. Now, for my liking, Assassin's Creed Unity has taken a step backwards, which is odd. I feel like the font kind of looks like it did in Assassin's Creed 2. A little bit different. It's the same kind of font, but just it looks a little bit more like that. The symbol, of course, there is at the top. Unity is in red, and we have a nice blue, a nice dark, gradiated blue for the main symbol and the Assassin's Creed title. The background in this one is a little less interesting, I think, because it doesn't really directly relate to the fact we're going to the French Revolution. The colouring does to some extent, but really it's just a city that is in the animus as a construct in that white light we've seen before, and it's just popping up and changing here and there to show the changing of the environment and the memories. It's got that quite harsh, broken section down top of the screen in terms of the white bars and light that changes, and that's really it in terms of the effects, and I just don't think it's particularly effective in showing the kind of cool stuff that we'll be getting up to in the game or the game's world, or doing anything different than we've seen in any other prior Assassin's Creed title screen. Let's just take a listen to the music. So as with prior titles, very stripped back, very minimalist. To begin with, we have the piano and the occasional chords. Then we have the orchestra kick in, the strings, but it's very melancholy. It's very subdued compared to prior titles. It hasn't got any of that bombast we've heard in the last few. But that understated nature does fit with the notion of the French Revolution and the things that we're going to be seeing and undertaking within the game. So this is one of my least favourite in the series. It's a bit too simplistic for my liking. I think they could have done a lot more to make it feed into what will be undertaken in the game and how it's represented before you get there in the title screen. So now we move to the more modern entries in the series. And of course, they took a big change in direction in this one, and that is Assassin's Creed Origins. So you'd think with this change to a more RPG-like gameplay style, the title screen would change a little bit more as well. And it only really semi-does. So obviously there's gold involved to represent the opulence of Egypt. the power and the money in that part of the world at that time. We have the very prominent and slightly changing gold and dark gold of the symbol with the eye in the middle to relate the assassin symbol to the Egyptians. The typical white font of the creed with those very nicely elegant lines past the creed, a little bit longer than usual this time. And then the really, really, again, prominent origins itself in that gold at the bottom of the screen. Now, in the background this time, we've got the Egyptian symbols, the hieroglyphs, on that nice, almost marbleized surface on the very, very dark black with the spotlight which just hangs in that centre and doesn't move really. We have particle effects of gold just off in the black. Very elegant and refined in the way this is designed, those particles. I really like that. Let's just take a quick listen to the music. Now again, this is very, very nice as a song that fits this type of context for Assassin's Creed. It's got that Egyptian and Middle Eastern flavour, those particular instruments and sounds that you will only find in that type of music. And it's got moments of quiet, it's got the strings whirring in the background, and then it picks up and it rises, and it gives a really interesting air of mystery to this ancient place that we've never been before. So although this is very simple as a title screen, and it does reflect many of the other Assassin's Creed title screens, it's got a little bit something different about it. And I do like the more gold presence on screen and the music that really fits with the visual design. Okay then, to our last Assassin's Creed title screen currently in the main series, and that is one of my favourites, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Now, we're not going to find any huge difference here. It's basically exactly the same as the prior title screen. For Origins, it's just actually a little bit worse in my opinion. So it takes exactly the same structure. It has the A, but this time literally an A. It's not the Assassin's Creed symbol that we know, but with that Spartan helmet prominently in bronze or brass just beneath it. And it's really nice. It's nice and distinct. The light again passes over it from left to right to give it a highlight, as it does with the Odyssey in the same colour below the typical Assassin's Creed font that's exactly the same as the prior one. The central theme we're seeing here is Spartans cast behind the main titles in white but doused with this grey lighting in battle, as if they would have been eulogised and immortalised as they were back in the day as these amazing warriors. What we don't have is those lovely particle effects surrounding the title screen that we had in Origins, and I think that really gave it a nice visual flourish. This doesn't really have that visual flourish. Okay, so let's just talk about the music for a second. Let's take a listen. This is my favourite track in any Assassin's Creed game for the title screen. I just think it fits wonderfully well. It's got the Arabic instruments, it's got the instruments of that period, of that time. It's got a nice heightened pace that builds and has a lovely crescendo. It's got that almost screech in the background that changes pitch, and it wouldn't be anywhere out of place in something like a film of 300's ilk. It would fit that beautifully. So it's one of my favourite tracks. It really drives forward and fits together well with what type of game we're going to be playing, the context and the environment in which we'll be playing in. So that was it. That was my Assassin's Creed Talking Title Screens epic special. Of course, my favourite, I think, throughout all of these, probably Black Flag. I like what they did with that animus version of the ocean almost, and Syndicate, because it's so different from the rest. It stands out, and I think if you remove the font and the titling from that and just have the machinery, the steamworks, it looks beautiful. Right, I hope you've really enjoyed this. Talk to me in the comments if you've spotted anything that I haven't that you think's really important in these title screens. And talk to me about Assassin's Creed. What's your favourite game in the series? Do you like the Assassin's Creed games, the modern ones, the older ones? What do you think is the most distinct thing about this particular franchise? Right, thank you very, very much for watching. If you liked the video, maybe hit that like button. If you didn't like the video, maybe hit that dislike button. That's what it's there for. If you really liked the video, subscribe to the channel. Get me kickstarted on a load more videos. And yeah, let's continue to talk games, folks. Citizen Slave.